Hi, good morning. I am here talking with my dear friend, artist Aaron King, who has a show up right now at Post Times in New York City until you said May 11th or
May 11th, or I think there's talk of extending it a week. Don't hold me to that, but I think the fairs are happening in town that week of the 11th, weekend of the 11th. So we may extend it one more week, but definitely up till May 11th. Yeah.
oh yeah, that's actually an important thing, like considering the timing for like when people are coming to town for some other event.
Right. Like you're always in that sort of like, okay, you're doing the social media thing, but then there's also just the old school word of mouth where people see that and then they tell their friends that maybe didn't see that. And then, especially when the fair and all these, whatever, other gallerists, collectors, people that are in town for it, give them additional time if they stay longer, different things like that. So,
How you feeling about like this point? You're like halfway through the show being up.
you get into this you get the jolt of working up into the show. You have your show open, then you have maybe the blues, whatever, we can talk about that later, the post-show blues. And then I'm in this weird middle point of I've met with my friends or other people that have wanted to meet at the space, and now it sort of slowly turns into what am I going to do with the work that stays with me? Am I going to preemptively make the measurements to build the crates, or am I going to bring those pieces back to my studio that in the end eventually start getting knocked around and damaged? So, I always want to believe that I'm in a growing stage of not doing that anymore, but it always happens. Yeah.
Because you work with sculpture and that's like
Right.
I've heard so many storage, long-term storage and keeping it from getting damaged is one of the big issues with sculpture.
Yeah, no, very, very silly in a city that requires so much money to have any amount of space to continue doing. But it's what I've always been drawn to, and it certainly makes life interesting. And also maybe you say goodbye to some works due to space limitations. But that's the way it goes. Yeah.
Hey, so you said something about getting the post-show blues and
Mm.
how you dealt with that.
For me, I don't have any easy answers. I wish that I even tried getting right back to work at a job of mine which basically just prolonged it for, kept it from happening for a week. But as soon as that job that was pretty stressful ended, I was like, oh, it's setting in. So, for me, it's hard for me even to identify hobbies or things I like sometimes, but for me, this coincided with the fishing starting to be available again. So even though I didn't want to do it, and I maybe wanted to just stay inside and think about the amount of time I spent on stuff and whatever else is happening or not happening by way of the show, I pushed myself to get on my bike and bike down to the river and go fishing. But I've yet to find outside of also just being around friends, finding a way to move through that in any sort of you know necessarily completely positive way. Yeah.
Yeah, but it sounds like you're aware of it when it's
Oh,
happening.
yeah, 100%. And I think it is also, I think, like so many other feelings in life, there's relief in knowing that it's fairly universal. There's not too many people that are not having that, and that shared grievances. You can take some heart with that, so it's nice. Yeah, I think coming out of college, I only went to undergrad. Coming out of college, I was like, art is my life. It is everything. Any money I make, anything I do, is for in that movement, in that push. And I missed out on a lot of sort of my friends' weddings or reunions. And I think that connection, I still regret those. And I think that's one thing, which is on a personal level, um, which I would push anybody to sort of, find the money to be able to do that. The other thing that I would tell myself outside of formal education is related to art is documentation of your work. I've been in several instances where I had no money at the end of making a show, and you know that idea of whether I'm going to pay for documentation or not comes up, and call a friend that's an artist, and I always get this sort of, you got to photograph it, man. That's all you got in the end, if that's all you got. So I would encourage everyone to not forget that. Not saying that you have to pay for the $1,500 a day person, but someone with legit, if you can't do it, lights and a camera. And I think the third thing that I was thinking about was time management, because in the studio, I think I had this idea, or I still continue to want to have this idea that I'm going to be in my studio for solid days, always, at least 3 to 4 days. And in reality, especially as you get older and you have additional responsibilities, time management becomes, well, I'm not going to be able to be a full day, but I can be there 3 hours one day, maybe 4 hours, maybe 6 hours another day. And it's like the old proverb of, you throw water on a rock and the water just goes over the rock. But if the water's that slow drip, eventually drips, and knocks a hole through the rock. So I try to believe in that idea, and it's worked. But it's difficult because I definitely have a romantic relationship with the idea of setting aside job and life and just being in the studio every day. But it's important to remember that that's not reality, and also maybe not the healthiest thing. So, yeah.
Do you think that like even when you're not there, if you are like committed to working, even if it's in small chunks, like while you're not there, something in the back of your mind is still chewing on those ideas?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's a benefit as well. I think being able to step away from the studio, whether you are at work, and for me, I always love a job where you can completely tune out, make an amount of money that like is okay, and be able to have those thoughts, and then have them knock around outside of the space of the studio, and maybe on the train going to work, or at work, or walking, in any sort of circumstance. I think is certainly a benefit. And yeah. How do you feel about making money from art? I've never been in a situation where, I've necessarily, made in serial sort of like a necessarily a body of work that was sort of like, oh, these are all blue or something like that. I've never had that instance where someone's bought up an entire show, or bought several of the paintings because they were blue. So I think my relationship to it has always been like, oh, someone likes me. This is amazing. Also, because it's sculpture, you're in a position where like these people now have to store it, or they have to live with it. So, you know, I've never felt completely comfortable with it, but I've also never had to deal with sort of what happens whenever like tons of people start wanting to buy your work, and you're in a position where they want a certain kind of the work that you made, or like, I've always, for one way or another, and I guess you could think of it as a benefit, is that the way that I work, not having to be sort of, the sort of changes in materials and different things like that, I've had then the freedom to sort of, bounce around from material to material, and sort of maybe a bit more freely, without the recourse of like, I'm going completely broke, because I've never, you know, as an artist, fully been able to support myself in a sustained way, in any sort of way, like without, work on the side. And that's also allowed me a certain amount, like I said, I'm get back to freedom. That's given me the freedom to make my choices, separate and apart from maybe what someone likes or doesn't like. That being said, it's also you got to burn the midnight oil some. So
the freedom of not needing any outcome from the work, just making it for reasons for yourself is like a really great feeling.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously it comes and goes, and I would just say that early on, and back in our Guild and Gray School days, I definitely right out of college took a credit card out, and charged it up a couple grand when I was making little to nothing, like in my other jobs, and that money on that credit card stayed with me for years. Um, I was able to make some money from that first show, but that went into living and moving forward. So I would encourage people to check out those interest rates because that's
Yeah,
also
none of this is easy. I don't mean to make be glib about like you don't have to make money from your work. It's
yeah,
all really thorny, not
yeah,
not easy to support oneself and to finance making artwork. And
100%. Yeah. I guess what I would say also in everybody's experience in one way or another is unique, and I think there's also a part of social media and the world that like sort of this is how an artist functions. This is the way that you have to do things. These are the things that people do whenever they want to be a successful artist. And I think, defining success, right? Defining goals, your ambitions and what those are in relationship to, are they aligning with being able to make a living? If they're not, and you find other ways, there's a million ways to do it, and there's a million ways to stay positive while doing it. But that's the goal for me is always trying to be able to do the things I wanted to do and not turn sour from like the realities or the pressures of what I should be doing, what it means to be doing something successfully. So, I mean, that's an ongoing thing as well.
yeah, I really appreciate
Uh,
sharing this, Aaron. Friends for nearly 20 years now, Aaron. You're like,
yeah. Yeah. Friends. Yeah, that's true. All the way back to Guild and Gray School. That's crazy. The basement, whenever I know you always make fun of, I mean, yeah, let's say that that's another thing that I've learned, right out of college. Was working as the help to install, and then later was able to show it with the gallery. But
this is a
I
Field and Grayskull gallery that was in Soho from 2000. When did they start? Six,
four,
four,
three,
four,
something.
four, three to 2009.
Yeah, yeah,
You
um,
both had shows.
yeah.
Had a studio in the basement, and you.
Yeah, I had a studio in the basement in exchange for getting to work there for maybe they got a little bit of a cheaper price, and then I got the benefit of this, say what you will of it, but I had a studio in a basement right in the middle of Soho. But I was working to help install the shows, and I would be there the week of installing, and then the opening would happen. I mean, this is me right out of college, and me still, I'm not social. I'm a bit socially awkward, anyways, in large crowds. So that's a thing. But even more so then, I was like, I'd seen the show, I'd help install it. So I'd either be in the basement or I'd leave after 30 minutes because I didn't want to be there anymore. And I would tell my younger self that, yeah, you should stick around. I am luckily in one way or another, a lot of the people, or at least some of the people that were in that crowd or crowds at those openings, I got to meet later on or become um, sociable with. But you know, I think I could have pushed myself to be a bit more earnest in my reaching out or meeting and hanging with the fellow artists, at least at those openings. So that's a regret.
I appreciate you came to upstairs to mine, and I was told like,
Good.
oh, Aaron does not always come.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Mentors, while not officially stepping into the idea of like, I need a mentor, and I found a mentor. I had some older people that had helped me along the way. I'm thinking of one in particular in Florida who actually paid for my admissions fee to apply to my college, and then continued to sort of support me by way of email or just I think I talk to people sometimes about this idea of of creative people or anybody that's sort of you know got a fire burning in whatever they're doing. This idea of zooming out on the world and caveman style or cavewoman style, whatever you want to call it, just these fires all over the world. Like, what's that person doing? I don't have to talk to them all the time, but I know when I go down to meet them or see them, they're always into their thing. And I think those are really important because being an artist can get pretty lonely in the studio. And whether you see people passing in your studio or not, those connections and those sort of maybe even ways of emulating, those sort of actions, which are maybe just putting your head down and getting to work, or just knowing that that person over there is doing that, has always been important for me, whether I identified it when I was younger or not.
Hey, can I
And I
ask
think,
you how you find these people? Because
yeah,
when I was young, I always wanted to find some kind of mentor, but couldn't ever really. And then I was talking to someone recently, realizing that this podcast thing is almost like a, open audience sort of mentorship for parasocial mentorship.
right, yeah,
But I'm
no,
curious about how you find these people in real life because I struggled with that.
yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I think some I don't, I'm trying to think. I mean, the person I'm thinking about in particular, like literally was the supervisor of I was lucky enough to go to an art magnet high school. And so, they sort of took me under their wing and then continued to sort of, hang out with me, let me work in his ceramic studio when I went down to Florida when I was on vacation, different things like that. I guess I would say he passed away in the last few years. And I would like to find more. I mean, I know I have some former professors that I still, communicate with that are they're in one way or another similar. But I think maybe that's the thing also is maybe I can't speak to how to find them, but I think whether you can identify them as we're talking about them not or not, but those connections are very special. And I don't think I took it for granted. And I think I really uh, took things from it, but it was, they're important. And when you got them, take advantage of them.
You get them from your peers now as we get
Try,
older.
yeah, try to. Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, and then I guess the other thing that I would say for constructive for younger artists, I mean, there's a whole host of things. In part, I do admissions for the college I went to, and so I talk to young kids. It's portfolio reviews. One of the biggest things that I think about is sort of, make the work, and I've heard this from other friends, but make the work that you can make, not sidelining yourself, but make the work that you can make with the money and the opportunities that you have, and make the most out of it. Like, don't try to make a $20 million movie on $1 million budget, but make and make what you can make, not trying to do this thing that which is not to say to crush dreams. It's more sometimes you get out of school, you have no money, you have no anything, and you're like, you look at people that are famous, or someone you want to be a famous artist, you want to do something, and you're in this position where you got plenty to be able to make great work with. It can just be distracting. I think about materials, like everybody's powder coating now, or everybody's using, years ago it was like, oh, where'd you get those resins to cast those things? Did you degas it? How did you get no bubbles? And I just, if your work falls in that path, go for it, do your thing. But I think this idea of having to have these materials, or this way of making things, which can cost lots of money, can be a real distraction.
That's like external expectations as opposed that are just expensive as opposed to focusing on like the core of your ideas. You make something with what you got.
Right. My mom's a first grade school teacher, retired, but she would always encourage me. But she would send me things, and so I have a piece of cutout paper from some board that she had in her class that was whatever. It doesn't matter that it's Henry David Thoreau. It could be anybody. But I've taken it with me to all my studios, but it says, I learned this, that if one advances confidently in the direction of his dreams and endeavors to live the life which he has imagined, he will meet with success unexpected in common hours. I think the focus here for me that I didn't know when I was younger was uh, what success, how I define success. And I think, trying to also locate what your dreams are is important as well. But I'm a big fan in a very corny way of quotes, and some people have made fun of me for that. But yeah, maybe we can end on that.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you so much, Aaron. I really appreciate it.
Okay, cool. Really appreciate it as well. Thank you, Mariah.